You know that gut-wrenching feeling? That moment when it finally clicks, and you realize the person you were ready to build a whole life with, they just see you as a convenient backup. A safe bet for when all the exciting adventures fall through. That was me. I was Jessica's safety net, and it took me a long, painful time to admit it. It all started innocently enough. We met through mutual friends at some backyard barbecue in Albany. Everyone else was coupled up, except for us. And honestly, it felt like fate. We both had our lives together, no drama, no baggage, just two normal people who clicked. The first 3 years were everything you'd want. We traveled to beautiful state parks, cooked together on weekends, had this whole routine where she'd make coffee in bed, and I'd surprise her with concert tickets or random road trips. We talked about getting a dog, buying a house in Savannah, the whole future thing. I even started looking at rings because, for me, it just felt right. But then, around year 3, something shifted. She started spending more time scrolling through social media, comparing our quiet dinners to her friends' party photos and festival stories. She'd show me posts from people we barely knew, going on about how they were really living and how we should be doing more exciting stuff. So, I tried. I really did. I planned weekend getaways to different towns, signed us up for rock climbing lessons, suggested salsa dancing. But nothing seemed to fix whatever she felt was missing. Her younger sister, Chloe, started getting in her ear constantly, telling her she was wasting her 20s, that she needed to experience everything before committing. And her coworker, Brittany, became this terrible influence, dragging her to girls' nights that turned into all-nighters at night spots I'd never heard of. Brittany was only 23 and lived like commitment was a disease, always posting about being wild and free. Suddenly, Jessica started echoing that same energy. My best friend, Ben, saw it coming from a mile away. He pulled me aside one night and told me she was treating me like a backup plan. But I didn't want to believe him. I mean, we'd built something real. Or so I thought. Her birthday that year should have been a wake-up call. I made reservations at the bistro where we had our first date, got tickets to see her favorite band, the whole romantic gesture. But she spent the entire dinner on her phone, barely touching her food, giving me one-word answers. When I showed her the concert tickets, she just smiled politely and said, "Oh, that's sweet, but I already made plans with the girls." It was like I was some acquaintance she needed to let down easy. I drove home alone that night while she went out, not coming back until 4 a.m., passing out on the couch still in her clothes. The next morning, she acted like everything was fine, even thanked me for the nice evening, like we'd actually spent it together. Have you ever felt invisible to someone you love? Then came her company party about a month later, and that's when I really felt it. She used to introduce me as her boyfriend with this proud smile. But this time, when someone asked who I was, she just casually said, "Oh, this is David." And when they pushed about how long we'd been together, she laughed it off, saying, "We're not really labeling anything." Right in front of me, like I was in on the joke. There was this guy there from her department, a total show-off type, who talked about skydiving and motorcycle trips. And she was eating it up, laughing at his stories, touching his arm, completely forgetting I existed. On the drive home, I asked about him, trying to keep my voice casual, and she got this dreamy look and said, "He's just so adventurous. You know, being around him makes me feel like I haven't really lived yet." And instead of calling out how messed up that was, I went home and started Googling extreme sports, like I could fix myself into being interesting enough. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when she sat me down with that serious face people make when they've been rehearsing a speech. She told me she hadn't really lived, that she needed to be free, that I was safe, but she wanted to have fun before settling into boring couple life. And then she actually suggested we take a break for 6 to 12 months so she could explore and come back without regrets. I just stared at her, processing what she was really saying. She wanted to test drive other guys while keeping me on hold as her guaranteed backup. And when I repeated her own words back to her, asking if I understood correctly, she got uncomfortable but nodded. I looked at her for a long moment and said, "Okay, take all the time you need." And I watched her face fall because she'd clearly expected me to fight, to beg, to negotiate terms like this was some kind of business deal. She packed her stuff that same night and moved in with Chloe temporarily, talking about how she just needed space to figure things out. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment we'd shared and pulled that ring box out of my drawer. I drove to the jewelry store the next morning and returned it. Got my money back. I didn't even feel sad about it anymore, just tired. Ben came over that night, and we didn't talk much. He just hung out, playing video games, like nothing happened. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. I realized something sitting there in the silence after 4 years of trying to be enough. I wasn't her person. I was her consolation prize. The guy she'd settle for after she finished shopping around. She texted me 3 days later, asking how I was doing with a sad emoji. I responded with just 2 words, I'm good. No explanation, no emotion. And apparently, that wasn't what she wanted to hear, because she didn't text again for a week. I looked at our photos on my phone one last time, all those smiling moments that felt real, and wondered if she'd been planning this exit the whole time, or if Chloe and Brittany really had convinced her the grass was greener. Either way, it didn't matter anymore, because I'd made my choice the second she made me optional. I wasn't going to be anyone's maybe, anyone's safety net, anyone's plan B, waiting in the wings while they figured out if they could do better. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The first week after she left was weird. I kept expecting her to walk through the door or text me some long apology. But instead, there was just silence and this strange sense of relief that I didn't have to perform anymore. Ben didn't give me any speeches about moving on or how there's plenty of fish in the sea. He just showed up with pizza and stayed until I felt like a human again. And that's the kind of support that actually matters. I took the money from returning that ring and built myself a high-end gaming setup, the kind I'd always wanted but never bought because we were supposedly saving for our future. Ben came over to help me put it together, making jokes the whole time, but I could tell he was genuinely happy to see me doing something for myself. 2 weeks in, I did something I'd been thinking about for years. I went to the local animal rescue and adopted this dog, a rescue mix who'd been there for months because he was too energetic for most people. I named him Gus, and suddenly, my entire routine changed. I had to wake up early for walks, come home at reasonable hours, actually leave my apartment instead of rotting on the couch. And honestly, that dog saved me from spiraling. The morning walks turned into longer hikes on weekends. I started noticing trails I'd driven past 100 times, and Gus would go crazy exploring every new path like it was the greatest adventure in the world. I needed something more, though, something to get the anger and frustration out of my system. So, I joined this fitness studio across town that Ben had mentioned. The coach there was this no-nonsense guy who didn't care about your feelings or your backstory. He just pointed at the heavy bag and told you to work. And that's exactly what I needed. I started going 3 times a week, then 4, then 5, learning proper form, building actual muscle, feeling my body get stronger while my head got clearer. The studio became my therapy. Every punch was me letting go of another piece of the person I'd been trying to be for her, the guy who constantly wondered if he was exciting enough, or adventurous enough, or whatever enough. I fixed my diet, started meal prepping on Sundays, got serious about sleep, built this whole routine that had nothing to do with impressing anyone and everything to do with respecting myself. Meanwhile, Jessica was living her best life all over social media, posting stories from night spots in lounges, photos with people I'd never seen before, captions about freedom and finding herself. But if you looked close, you could see the desperation in it, like she was trying to convince everyone, including herself, that she was happy. Ben would send me screenshots sometimes when she posted something particularly ridiculous, and we'd laugh about it. But honestly, I stopped checking her profiles after the first month because I had better things to do. She went through guys like they were rental cars. First, there was the adventure guy from her office, who turned out to be a total player. Then came some finance bro who looked good in photos but apparently had a controlling streak and an ego the size of a small country. After that was some artist type who talked about open relationships but really just wanted to sleep around while she stayed loyal. I heard through mutual friends that he was crashing at her place, eating her food, and contributing nothing. Her friend group started falling apart too. Brittany, that coworker who'd been dragging her to clubs, apparently hooked up with one of the guys Jessica was seeing, and suddenly they weren't posting together anymore. Around month 3, she started texting me again. Nothing serious at first, just casual messages asking how I was doing or saying she saw something that reminded her of our time together. And I'd respond politely but briefly, because I genuinely was busy with my actual life. You could tell it threw her off that I wasn't sitting by my phone waiting for her to come back, that I had things going on and wasn't available for her emotional support whenever she felt nostalgic. I met Sarah completely by accident when I brought Gus in for his checkup at this vet clinic near my apartment. She was the veterinarian who examined him, super professional and knowledgeable, but also so warm with the animals. And Gus immediately loved her, which was rare because he was picky about people. We started talking about dog training and hiking trails. And she mentioned she took her own dog out to a regional preserve every weekend. So, naturally, I said we should go together sometime. It wasn't even romantic at first, just 2 dog owners hanging out on trails. But I noticed how easy it was to be around her, how she didn't play games or test me or compare our quiet moments to someone else's highlight reel. She had her own career, her own apartment, her own fully formed life, and she wasn't looking for someone to complete her or make her feel alive. She just enjoyed my company for what it was. We started seeing each other more regularly, grabbing coffee after hikes, having dinner at her place, where our dogs would play while we cooked together. And it felt healthy in a way I'd forgotten relationships could feel. There were no tests, no hoops to jump through, no wondering if I was measuring up. Just 2 adults who liked each other spending time together. Sarah thought my dedication to boxing and fitness was attractive, not boring. She appreciated that I had discipline and goals, instead of wishing I was more spontaneous or reckless. About 4 months after the breakup, I posted a photo on Instagram from a weekend hiking trip. Just me and Sarah and both our dogs on this overlook with a great view. Nothing dramatic or showy, just a nice moment. Jessica saw it within minutes, and my phone blew up with text messages, asking who that was. Was I seeing someone? Was this just a rebound? How could I move on so fast? Like she had any right to question my life after what she'd done. She sent paragraphs about how we had history and how I was throwing away for years and how this new person couldn't possibly understand me the way she did. And I just let her spiral, because responding would only feed into it. Ben told me to screenshot everything just in case things got weird. And Sarah was completely unbothered by the whole thing. She knew the situation and wasn't threatened because she was secure in herself. I realized somewhere in all of this that I'd become a completely different person than the guy who'd begged for scraps of attention and tried to turn himself into someone more exciting. I had my dog, my routine, my boxing, my actual healthy relationship with someone who chose me first. Not after testing the market. Jessica kept texting sporadically, switching between anger and nostalgia. But I kept my responses minimal, and eventually she got the message that I wasn't her backup plan anymore. One night, I was cooking dinner at Sarah's place, and she asked me if I ever regretted how things ended with Jessica. And I realized I didn't. Not even a little bit. Because that breakup had forced me to build a life I actually wanted, instead of one I thought I was supposed to want. Jessica had been so sure I'd be waiting when she finished exploring. So confident that safe and boring me would be right there, ready to lock her down. But she'd misunderstood something fundamental about the whole situation. A break isn't a pause button. It's not a save point in a video game where you can go off and do whatever, then reload to where you left off. It's an ending, a door closing, and I'd walked through a different door entirely while she was out there discovering that the grass isn't greener. It's just different grass with different problems. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, I sat on her couch with both dogs at my feet and thought about the ring I'd almost given to someone who saw me as a settlement. And I felt nothing but gratitude that she'd been honest enough to show me who she really was before I'd made that mistake permanent. About 5 months after the breakup, Jessica demanded to meet in person. Not requested or suggested, but basically told me we needed to have a serious conversation, like she was still in a position to make demands on my time. I agreed to meet at a neutral bistro in the city center because I figured it was better to do this once and be done with it, rather than have her show up at my apartment or my work. She walked in looking like she'd prepared for a job interview. Dressed up, hair done, makeup perfect, carrying herself like she was about to close some important deal. We sat down, and she launched into this whole speech about how she'd learned so much about herself over the past few months. How she'd grown and matured and figured out what really mattered, and how she was ready now for the serious relationship and the house and the engagement and kids. Laying it all out like she was presenting a business proposal. She talked about our history, our 4 years together, all the memories we'd made, and how that had to count for something, how we couldn't just throw away what we'd built. I sat there listening to her go through her entire pitch, watching her smile like she expected me to be relieved or grateful that she'd finally decided I was good enough. And I felt absolutely nothing except maybe a distant curiosity about how disconnected from reality she'd become. When she finally stopped talking and looked at me expectantly, I took a breath and said, "You've got this wrong. I wasn't waiting for you." And watched her face change as the words sank in. I told her I was with someone else now. Someone who'd chosen me from day one, without needing to test other options first. Someone who didn't need to go shopping around before deciding I was worth keeping. Her whole expression shifted from confident to confused to angry in about 5 seconds. Suddenly, she was asking who this person was, how long this had been going on, was I doing this just to hurt her? Was this some rebound thing I was using to make her jealous? She started tearing down Sarah without even knowing her, calling her basic and saying she couldn't possibly understand our connection, bringing up inside jokes and memories like they were evidence in a court case. She actually said we had history together, real history, and that had to mean more than some new fling with someone I barely knew. I let her finish and then said, "Here's the thing, though. You didn't choose me. You chose to keep your options open." And I explained that I wasn't a backup plan or a safety net or a guaranteed fallback option. She tried to argue that it wasn't like that she just needed time to be sure, that everyone has doubts and she was just being honest about hers. But I cut through all of it and told her that her honesty was actually the kindest thing she'd ever done because it showed me exactly where I stood. The conversation ended with her oscillating between anger and tears, trying every emotional angle she could think of. But I stayed calm and just kept repeating that we were done and I'd moved on. She left the restaurant looking shell-shocked, like she genuinely couldn't process that her plan hadn't worked, and I went home feeling lighter than I had in years. The text messages started hitting my phone that same night. Long paragraphs about how I was making a mistake, how I'd regret this, how we were meant to be together, and I was just scared of giving her another chance. Then came the sad texts about how she couldn't eat or sleep, how her family was worried about her, how I'd broken her in ways she didn't know she could break, full manipulation mode, trying to guilt me into responding. I didn't reply to any of it, just let her send her messages into the void, and my silence seemed to make everything worse. She started watching my Instagram and other social media obsessively, viewing my stories within seconds of posting. And I noticed through mutual friends that she created fake accounts to get around the fact that I'd blocked her main profile on everything. The fake accounts would leave weird comments on Sarah's public posts. Nothing directly threatening, but definitely passive-aggressive. Little digs that were just plausible enough to seem innocent. Then it escalated into real-world stuff. She started showing up places she knew I'd be, the coffee shop near my fitness studio, the park where I walked Gus, always with some excuse about how she was just in the neighborhood. People we both knew started telling me she was asking questions about Sarah, where she worked, where she lived, what kind of person she was, fishing for information under the guise of just being curious. The final straw came when she actually went to Sarah's vet clinic, pretending she needed a consultation for a pet she didn't have, asking the receptionist questions, and trying to get a look at Sarah's schedule. Sarah called me after that incident, pretty shaken up, because this wasn't just online drama anymore. This was someone actively trying to insert themselves into her workplace and her life. Ben had been telling me to document everything for weeks. So, I had folders full of screenshots, saved voicemails, timestamps of when she'd shown up at various locations. And Sarah had started keeping records, too. We filed for a restraining order. And honestly, I thought maybe that would wake her up, make her realize how far she'd gone. But she showed up to the court hearing looking exhausted and defeated, trying to play the victim and claimed she was just trying to get closure. The judge wasn't buying it, looked at the evidence we'd presented, the pattern of escalating behavior, and granted a 1-year no-contact order right there. After that, she finally seemed to disappear. Mutual friends said she'd moved back to her childhood town or maybe to another city. And for the first time in months, I could breathe without wondering when she'd pop up next. Sarah and I moved in together about 8 months after we'd started dating. Nothing rushed or dramatic, just a natural progression that made sense for where we were. I proposed to her on a hiking trail, the same one where we'd had our first dog walking date. No elaborate plan or public spectacle, just me and her and our dogs, and a ring I'd actually chosen for the right person this time. Ben was genuinely happy for me. Made jokes about how I'd leveled up in every possible way. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Life got quiet in the best way possible. No chaos, no drama, no wondering if I was enough or if someone better was waiting around the corner. Just over a year after the restraining order was granted, while after it had expired, I got a text from an unknown number with just 2 words, "I'm sorry." And I looked at it for maybe 5 seconds before deleting it without responding. I don't hate Jessica, and I don't spend time thinking about her. I genuinely hope she figures out whatever she needs to figure out and finds some peace. But she's not going to find it with me. Not as her backup plan, not as her safe option, not as the guy she settles for when everything else falls apart. I'm building a life with someone who wanted me from the start. Who sees my stability as a strength instead of a boring default. Who doesn't need to explore other options to know what she has. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you who they really are before you make a permanent mistake. And looking back now, I'm grateful Jessica was honest enough to do that. Even if her timing and methods were awful, she gave me all the freedom she wanted. And I used it to build something better, something real, something that didn't require me to audition for the role of boyfriend or wait around hoping to be chosen. That's the thing about being someone's plan B. Once you realize that's what you are, the only move is to walk away and find someone for whom you're plan A. And I did exactly that. What do you think you would have done in my shoes?